The chandeliers in La Lumiere glowed like captured suns, their golden light spilling across velvet banquettes and polished crystal. Monica had always believed restaurants carried ghosts, the anxious laughter of lovers, the bitterness of failed toasts, the sharp tang of deals made and broken. Tonight, the air felt haunted in a different way, thick with tension that clung to her as she moved between tables balancing trays. She watched the billionaire even before she reached him. Victor Drexler sat at the center of the room like a king daring the world to dethrone him. His presence seemed to drain oxygen from the air. Tall silver hair perfectly combed back, his tailored suit darker than the shadows at the edges of the room. Around him, 3 European men leaned in, murmuring in heavy accents. Monica couldn't catch much, but the strain was visible. Brows furrowed, hands cutting impatient arcs in the air. The problem was obvious. Language. She set down a new round of champagne flutes, her posture careful, professional, invisible but attentive. That was how servers survived nights like this. Victor didn't glance at her at first. His jaw tightened as one of the men repeated himself in rapid German. Again, Victor snapped in English, waving a dismissive hand. His accent was faint, Eastern European iron softened by years in New York. Slower. The German kept going, growing louder, frustration leaking from every syllable. The other 2 tried to mediate in broken English, but it was a wreck of half-finished sentences and mistranslations. Victor's fingers drummed on the tablecloth. This is pathetic. We circled for an hour and still nothing. He leaned back, eyes narrowing. Do any of you understand me? Or should I assume incompetence is the only language spoken here? The insult hung heavy. Monica knew enough German to recognize the men's offense. She also knew enough to understand what Victor was missing. Numbers, dates, urgency. He was minutes away from walking out. She could feel it in the stiffness of his shoulders. Her pulse quickened. She shouldn't get involved. Waitresses didn't interrupt billionaires. Waitresses kept their heads down, smiled, and prayed for tips. But something burned inside her, a voice that whispered, "Say it. Say something before he explodes." Victor's hand slammed against the table, rattling the crystal. The room froze for half a second, diners pretending not to stare. "I don't have time for this circus," he growled. "Patience is a currency, gentlemen. Mine is bankrupt," the German man began again, louder, desperate. And Monica, before she could stop herself, spoke, sagt, "Dass die Lieferung sich 3 Wochen verzögert, wenn die Verträge nicht heute Nacht unterschrieben werden." Every head turned. Her tray tilted in her hand. She nearly lost grip but held steady. Victor's icy eyes locked onto her, disbelief cutting through his fury. The Germans blinked, relief softening their features. "You speak German," Victor said, his voice low, incredulous. Monica's throat went dry. "Yes, sir. Like a native. My mother was," she admitted. Her heart thudding so loud she wondered if they could hear. The German men immediately launched into rapid explanation, directing their words at her now, pleading for clarity. She translated, careful, her voice even. "They're saying the transport contracts require signatures tonight, otherwise the shipment will be delayed 3 weeks. Customs in Hamburg has tightened restrictions. Enough," Victor cut in, though his gaze never left her face. "Translate every word. I want precision." So she did. Back and forth, sentence after sentence, the words flowing smoother than she expected. It felt like stepping into a forgotten skin. The language wrapping around her tongue with surprising ease. She mediated numbers, clauses, conditions. Slowly, the room's tension shifted, still taut but purposeful. Victor listened, calculating, his impatience cooled into razor focus. He nodded at moments, interjected sharp questions. Monica carried his tone into German, making it clear, clipped. She wasn't just repeating words, she was channeling him, and he noticed. The deal, once crumbling, found its footing. Agreements were struck. One of the Germans finally relaxed enough to lift his glass in toast. Victor clinked his champagne against theirs, though his eyes remained fixed on Monica as if trying to solve a riddle. When she stepped back, pulse still racing, Victor beckoned her closer. "What's your name?" "Eva," she lied automatically. Eva, the middle name she used when she didn't want strangers knowing the real one. "Eva," he repeated slowly, tasting the syllables. "You work here long?" "A few months." "You hide this skill, why?" "I don't use it much anymore." Victor tilted his head, studying her like a specimen. "You saved me from wasting an evening." That has value. She forced a polite smile. I'm glad I could help, sir. But his gaze lingered too long, a weight pressing against her skin. She'd seen wealthy men look at women before, the appraisal thinly disguised. This was different. His eyes didn't just look. They measured, calculated, consumed. As she retreated to the edge of the room, Monica, Ava, felt the shift in her bones. Something irreversible had begun at that table. The rest of the night blurred. She served dishes, cleared plates, poured wine, but her mind replayed every detail. His hand slamming the table, his eyes when she spoke German. The way the men deferred once she bridged the gap. Near closing, Victor rose to leave. His entourage trailed behind, but he paused by her station. The restaurant had thinned, only a few lingering couples whispering in the corners. You have a gift, he said softly. Up close, his presence was suffocating. She could smell his cologne, sharp, expensive, something woody with a trace of smoke. You reminded me tonight patience can be bought, but talent cannot. Thank you, sir. Ava, he said again as if ensuring he'd remember. We will speak soon. Then he was gone, leaving the scent of power and threat in his wake. She clocked out with trembling hands, whispering goodnights to co-workers who'd seen nothing, understood nothing. On the subway ride home, she stared at her reflection in the scratched window, seeing not herself but the echo of his eyes. She told herself it was nothing. A moment, a coincidence. Billionaires forgot waitresses as quickly as they noticed them, but deep down, in the quiet of her chest, Monica knew. Victor Drexler would not forget her. And neither would she forget the chill in her spine when his patience ended and her life, without warning, tipped into his orbit. The night had begun with tension at a table. It ended with the seed of something darker, obsession dressed as gratitude, and that seed was already taking root. The gossip started the next morning, carried in whispers between clinking coffee cups and the hiss of the espresso machine. I swear he looked at her like she was dessert, said Carla, the hostess leaning across the counter. Billionaires don't stare at waitresses unless they're planning something. Monica, Eva here, kept her head down as she rolled silverware into napkins. The cotton felt stiff under her fingers. She didn't flinch, didn't rise to the bait. That was the trick. Let them talk until the story exhausted itself. But Carla wasn't finished. You saw it too, right? She pressed the bartender. Luis shrugged. Man had a deal about to tank. She swoops in speaking German like she's some kind of secret agent. Hell yeah, he looked at her. Agent Morales, Carla teased, flashing Monica a grin sharp enough to cut. Careful, honey. Guys like that don't see you. They consume you. Monica forced a smile, folding another napkin. Maybe he just appreciated not losing millions over a translation issue. Please, Carla scoffed. Men like him don't say thank you. They say, what's your number? The truth was worse. Victor Drexler hadn't asked for her number. He had said, we will speak soon. A promise, not a request. That night she walked home through the drizzle, her jacket thin against the damp. Queen's streets glimmered under streetlights, the rain catching in potholes like fractured mirrors. She lived in a one-bedroom with her mother, a space that smelled perpetually of boiled coffee and lavender detergent. Her mother, Ingrid, sat at the kitchen table with a crossword puzzle, her gray hair pulled into a bun. German newspapers, always German, were spread beside her, ink smudged on her fingertips. You're late, Ingrid said without looking up. Shift ran long. Did you eat? I'll make something later. Ingrid's eyes flicked up then, sharp as glass. Later becomes never. You run yourself ragged for pennies. That restaurant doesn't care if you starve. Monica hung her jacket, trying not to sigh. We need the money. We always need money, Ingrid muttered in German. But at what cost, Mädchen? Monica froze at the word. Girl. A reminder she was still in her mother's eyes, half-formed, unfinished. I'm fine, Mama. But Ingrid studied her more closely, her intuition razor-sharp. Something happened tonight. The image of Victor's eyes flashed unbidden, the weight of his voice curling around her name. Monica swallowed. Nothing, just work. Her mother's silence was the kind that filled rooms, pressing against walls. Finally, Ingrid nodded once, as though deciding not to push. But Monica knew the question lingered. 2 days later, it happened. Victor's driver appeared outside the restaurant in a sleek black car, his presence impossible to ignore. Carla nearly dropped her seating chart when she saw Monica being called outside. See? Carla hissed. What did I tell you? The driver opened the door without explanation. Inside, Victor sat alone, a dark suit draped effortlessly on his broad frame. The city reflected in the tinted glass behind him, a kaleidoscope of neon and rain. Ava, he said smoothly as though they were old acquaintances. Sit. Her pulse jumped, but she obeyed. The leather smelled expensive, the air-conditioned chill biting her arms. I dislike debts, Victor began. You saved me embarrassment. You clarified what others could not. That is worth repayment. She kept her voice steady. You don't owe me anything. His mouth twitched, almost amused. Then perhaps you owe yourself. Do you enjoy waiting tables? She hesitated. It pays the bills. Barely, he said flatly. I require a translator. Someone precise, discreet. You would be compensated far more than folding napkins. Her stomach nodded. Why me? You could hire anyone. Because you are invisible, Victor said, eyes piercing. No one sees a waitress. That is useful. And you have the accent of someone born there, not schooled. Native, that is rarer than you think. He leaned closer. So, do you accept? Monica thought of Ingrid at the kitchen table. The rent overdue. The way her chest tightened each time a utility bill arrived. She thought of the shadows in her mother's past. The German words spoken in hushed tones about leaving, escaping, surviving. A dangerous man was offering her a hand out of poverty. She knew better than to take it. But desperation had a gravity all its own. Yes, she heard herself say. Victor's smile was small, triumphant. Good, tomorrow my office. 8 o'clock. Do not be late. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving her breathless in the leather-scented dark. Back home, Ingrid was waiting. She always knew. You saw someone, she said, her voice thin with suspicion. Monica didn't answer. Was it a man? Yes, Monica admitted quietly. Ingrid's hands trembled as she set down her crossword pen. Men like that took everything from me, from us. Don't be a fool, Mädchen. I'm not you, Monica snapped, sharper than she meant. The words struck her mother like a slap. For a moment, the old silence roared between them. The silence of years unspoken. Ingrid fleeing East Germany. The father Monica never knew. The scars hidden under long sleeves. Secrets that shaped them both but were never named. Monica softened her voice. This is just work, translation, nothing more. Ingrid shook her head. Work can be chains too. The next morning, Victor's office felt more like a fortress than a workplace. Steel and glass rising above Manhattan, guarded by men with earpieces. Inside, polished marble floors stretched endlessly, reflecting chandeliers like pools of light. A secretary ushered her into a boardroom where Victor stood by the window, gazing down at the city like a general surveying territory. You came, he said without turning. You asked. He finally faced her, his eyes softening just enough to suggest approval. Then let us begin. Stacks of contracts waited on the table, thick with clauses. He handed her one without ceremony. Translate. Out loud. She did, her German fluid, her English precise. Hours passed, her voice carrying terms of shipping routes, acquisitions, discreet negotiations with governments. It was a world she had never touched. Billion-dollar stakes dressed in clauses and signatures. When she faltered on a phrase, Victor corrected gently, almost fatherly. When she flowed seamlessly, he smiled faintly as though confirming his choice. Yet beneath the civility, she felt it. His hunger for control. He moved pieces like a chess master, and now she was a pawn on his board. By the time she left, her throat raw from words, she knew one thing. She was stepping into a life that wasn't hers. And once inside, it would be nearly impossible to step back out. That night, she lay awake, listening to her mother's breathing through the thin wall. She told herself she was doing it for survival. For the bills, for the rent, for the chance to give her mother the comfort she'd never had. But deep inside, she knew the truth. She wanted more than survival. She wanted to step out of invisibility. She wanted power, even if it came wrapped in Victor's cold shadow. And so, Eva Morales, waitress, daughter, secret keeper, began the first step toward becoming Victor Drexler's translator, his confidant and eventually his enemy. The first time Eva boarded Victor's jet, she felt the ground give way beneath her, not physically, but existentially, as though stepping off a curb she hadn't seen. One moment she was climbing a narrow metal staircase on a rain-slicked tarmac. The next, she was inside a floating world stitched from cream leather, polished mahogany and hushed luxury. "Sit," Victor told her, his hand grazing her back in what could have been courtesy, but felt more like possession. She obeyed, lowering herself into a seat softer than any mattress she'd owned. A crystal glass appeared in front of her, filled with champagne. Outside, the storm clawed at the night sky, but inside, everything was still. An aquarium of wealth sealed from weather and consequence. "You'll learn quickly," Victor said as the engines roared to life. "Travel is negotiation. You cannot win if you are not there in person. Voice alone is weakness. Presence is power." Eva nodded, clutching her glass, though she didn't drink. The jet tilted upward, Manhattan shrinking beneath them. For the first time in her life, the city that had always towered over her looked small. The weeks bled together, an endless loop of boardrooms and hotel suites, men with steel in their voices and hunger in their eyes. Victor at the head of every table, Eva at his side, his translator, his bridge. She carried his words into German and back again. Her tone sharp when he was ruthless, soft when he feigned diplomacy. Once, after a particularly brutal meeting in Berlin, where Victor reduced a rival to silence with nothing but a smirk, he leaned toward her in the car and whispered, "Do you see, Eva? Words are knives, but in the right hands." He touched her wrist lightly, his thumb tracing the vein. "They are scalpels." She should have shivered. Instead, she burned. At night, the intimacy grew in increments. A glance that lingered too long. A brush of hands when he handed her documents. His voice dropping low when he said her name, as though testing how it felt in his mouth. The first kiss came not in a bedroom, but in the back of a limousine after a dinner in Vienna. He leaned in suddenly, as though the air between them had been rehearsing for weeks. His lips pressed firm, decisive. "You're mine now," he said when he pulled back. It was not a question. The gifts began soon after. A necklace that shimmered like water. Dresses cut to fit her perfectly, as though he'd studied her body in absence. Shoes that cost more than her rent. Each time she protested, half-hearted, half-hoping, he waved her off. "It is not indulgence," he said once, fastening a diamond bracelet around her wrist. "It is recognition. You are no longer invisible." She told herself she accepted because it was easier, because refusal would only sharpen his gaze. But when she caught her reflection in hotel mirrors draped in silk, diamonds catching the light, she couldn't deny the thrill. Invisibility was safe. But it had never felt like this. Her mother noticed the change. "You're glowing," Ingrid said one evening, studying her daughter over a plate of reheated soup. "But it is the glow of a candle burning too fast." Eva pulled her sleeve down to cover the bracelet. "It's just work, Mama." Work does not make a woman smile when she is alone. Eva's smile faded. "You don't understand. I understand men like him." Ingrid's voice cracked, the words half memory, half warning. "They lift you to heaven so the fall will kill you." Eva turned away, unable to answer. When she found out she was pregnant, she sat on the cold bathroom floor of a Paris hotel suite, the white stick trembling in her hand. A rush of nausea, not from the pregnancy but from fear, churned her stomach. Victor was in the next room dictating something into his phone, his tone sharp with authority. She imagined telling him. She imagined silence stretching after her confession, then his slow, deliberate smile. When she finally emerged, pale but composed, he glanced up. "You're ill?" She shook her head. "No, just tired." She didn't tell him. Not yet, but secrets had a way of slipping. 2 weeks later, when she pushed away a glass of wine at dinner, his eyes narrowed. "Why? I'm not drinking tonight." "You always drink tonight." His voice was soft but dangerous, like snow concealing a cliff. She stared at the tablecloth. "I'm pregnant." The word hung between them like a shot fired in a silent hall. Victor leaned back slowly, as though absorbing a blow. Then, to her surprise, he laughed. Not a full laugh, sharp, short, almost joyful. "My son," he said, certainty already carved into his tone. At last she swallowed. "What if it's a daughter? Then she will be my heir in spirit. But it will be a son." His hand covered hers across the table, heavy, inescapable. "You will never want for anything again." Something inside her recoiled. The promise sounded less like comfort, more like a sentence. The weeks of her pregnancy blurred into a strange twilight. Victor surrounded her with doctors, nutritionists, bodyguards. "For protection," he said. But the walls of care were walls all the same. Carla at the restaurant stopped calling. Her friends' texts dried up. Ingrid worried aloud, her questions sharper, but Eva deflected until her mother fell silent with grief. The world contracted until it was Victor's voice. Victor's rules, Victor's shadow. One night, when she tried to protest, "I need to see my mother," he kissed her forehead and whispered, "You need nothing but me." Dependence is not weakness, it is trust. She lay awake after he slept, staring at the ceiling, whispering to the child inside her, "I will not let him own us. I promise." Yet part of her, small, dangerous, loved the safety, the penthouses, the security, the certainty of meals and warmth. For the first time in her life, she didn't worry about bills or eviction. Power seduced as much as it suffocated, and Eva, caught between fear and desire, didn't yet know which would win. By the time Lucas was born, she understood. Victor held their son like a trophy, showing him to associates, whispering to the baby in German about legacy, empire, bloodlines. To Eva, Lucas was fragile, sacred. To Victor, he was proof. That night, watching Victor cradle their child, Eva realized something vital. Love with this man would never be love at all. It would be ownership, and she would have to choose. Surrender her freedom to protect Lucas or fight, knowing that resistance meant war. Lucas's first cry was the most beautiful sound Eva had ever heard, and the most terrifying. In that sharp, wet wail, she heard both a beginning and a warning. She clutched him to her chest, her body trembling with exhaustion, tears streaking her cheeks. His skin was pink, his fists impossibly small. She whispered in German words her mother used to whisper to her as a child. "Mein Herz, mein Leben, my heart. My life." Then Victor took him. Not roughly, not cruelly, just with the certainty of a man who believed ownership was his birthright. He held Lucas aloft, his silver hair catching the sterile hospital light, and murmured in German, "My heir." Eva watched, her body still shaking from labor, and felt the cage begin to close. The first weeks at home blurred into sleepless nights and tender mornings. Eva lived for Lucas, the tiny fists clutching her finger, the way he quieted when she sang. But even in those intimate moments, Victor was there. "You hold him too much," he said one night, watching her nurse the baby. "He needs closeness," Eva replied. "He needs strength." "Do not make him soft," she bit back a retort. Victor never yelled. He didn't need to. His calm disapproval carried more weight than anger. By the time Lucas was 6 months old, Victor's control extended into every corner of their lives. A nanny appeared, not one Eva chose, but one Victor vetted. "So you can rest," he said. Rest meant he could decide when she was with Lucas and when she wasn't. When Eva suggested enrolling Lucas in a local daycare so he could play with other children, Victor's response was swift. "Our son does not belong with the children of nobodies. He will have tutors, private schools, the best." Even Eva's friendships were scrutinized. Carla texted her once asking to meet for coffee. Eva replied yes, desperate for something normal. The next day, Victor's voice was soft, dangerous. "Your friend works in a restaurant. What do you gain from her? Gossip, cheap laughs? You are not a waitress anymore, Eva." She never saw Carla again. The mansion outside the city became her world. High ceilings, endless halls, a garden trimmed to perfection. Beautiful, suffocating. She pushed Lucas's stroller along the gravel paths, whispering to him about freedom, about escape, as though the words themselves could shield him. One afternoon, while Victor was away, Eva wandered into his study. She wasn't supposed to. His office was a sanctum, always locked, always guarded by silence. But that day the door was ajar. Inside, the air was different. Heavy stacks of files covered the desk. Names, numbers, photographs clipped to documents. She picked one up, an image of a young girl, maybe 15, her eyes wide with fear. German words on the page, Verkaufslieferung, transit. Her stomach dropped. She flipped to another girl. Then another, human trafficking, hidden inside shipping manifests and logistics contracts. Her hands shook so badly the papers slipped from her fingers. Behind her, the floor creaked. She spun. The nanny stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Mrs. Drexler," the nanny said softly. "You shouldn't be in here." Eva forced her voice steady. "I was just looking for Lucas's blanket." The nanny hesitated, then nodded once. Of course. Eva gathered the papers, shoved them back into the stack, and slipped past. Her heart didn't stop pounding until she was back in Lucas's nursery, clutching him against her chest as though he could anchor her to sanity. That night, she watched Victor across the dinner table. He was calm as ever, cutting his steak with surgical precision. "You're quiet," he said without looking up. "Just tired," she murmured. But inside, her thoughts were fire. Every deal she had translated for him, every coded phrase that had slipped past her comprehension, they weren't just business. They were cover. She excused herself early, retreating to Lucas's room. Sitting in the dark, rocking him gently, she whispered, "I won't let him touch you. Not his world. Not his cruelty. You're mine, Lucas. Mine." Her tears fell onto the baby's soft hair. Days turned into weeks, and Eva played her role carefully. She smiled when Victor looked at her. She translated contracts, ignoring the shiver in her bones when numbers didn't add up. She laughed at the right moments, wore the dresses he chose, but inside, she built a quiet rebellion. She researched in secret, her laptop hidden beneath blankets during Lucas's naps. She read about trafficking rings, shipping codes, offshore accounts. She pieced together the language of Victor's empire, letter by letter, and every night when Lucas slept, she made him a vow. "I will protect you even if it kills me." One evening, Victor returned from a trip in a rare good mood. He poured her wine, kissed her cheek. "Our empire grows," he said. "Our?" she asked carefully. "You are part of this, Eva. You translate, you understand. You stand beside me." Her smile felt like glass. "I only want Lucas safe." Victor's eyes darkened. "Lucas is safe because of me. Never forget that." He touched her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You are safe because of me." For the first time, she didn't lower her eyes. She stared back, letting her silence answer. Victor studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, slow and thin. "Good. You are learning strength." That night, Eva lay awake with Lucas's crib beside her bed. She listened to his breathing, steady and innocent. Victor's words echoed like chains. "You are safe because of me." But she knew the truth. Safety under Victor was just another word for captivity. And Eva Morales, mother, waitress, unwilling accomplice, was already searching for the key to break free. The email draft sat on her laptop screen like a loaded gun. To Federal Bureau of Investigation. Subject: Information on Victor Drexler. Eva's fingers hovered over the keyboard, her pulse hammering. She'd rehearsed this moment for weeks, building courage in secret during Lucas's naps, whispering plans into the dark when the house was silent. Now, staring at the words, she felt the weight of 1,000 invisible eyes. What if they didn't believe her? What if they told Victor? Her chest tightened, but she pressed send. There was no turning back. The first reply came 3 days later. "We received your message. Meet our contact. 1 p.m., Washington Square Park, South Fountain." Eva folded the paper printout into her coat pocket, her breath shallow. Lucas was with the nanny. Victor was in Zurich. For the first time in months, she walked alone through the city streets, the winter air biting her cheeks. At the fountain, a woman in a gray coat approached. Dark hair, no makeup, steady eyes. She sat beside Eva on the bench without greeting. "You're Morales?" Eva nodded. "Tell me what you know." Her voice was flat, professional, not a hint of sympathy. Eva swallowed hard. "Victor Drexler. He runs more than shipping contracts. I've seen documents. Names of girls, ages, routes through Hamburg, Antwerp. They're not shipments of goods. They're people." The agent didn't flinch, just pulled a notepad. "You can get us evidence?" Eva forced her voice steady. "Yes, I translate everything." "He trusts me." The woman's pen paused. "That makes you valuable, but it also makes you a target." Eva shivered, looking at her trembling hands. "I have a son. He's all that matters. Help me protect him." The agent's eyes softened for the briefest second. "Then don't get caught. Get us what we need and we'll handle the rest." For weeks, Eva became two people. By day, she was Victor's polished translator, smiling on his arm, whispering in German during negotiations. By night, she photographed documents with her phone, sending them in encrypted bursts to a number the agent had given her. She became meticulous, careful, but fear was a constant hum under her skin. One mistake, and she wouldn't just lose Lucas, she would lose her life. The mistake came not from her, but from trust. Carla. She hadn't spoken to her old friend in months, but loneliness had gnawed too long. One evening when Victor was away, she called her from a burner phone, her voice trembling. "I can't talk long," Eva whispered, "but I need you to know I didn't forget you." Carla's voice was warm, nostalgic. "God, Eva, I thought you were dead. Everyone says you vanished into his mansion like a ghost. I can't explain. I'm trying to get out." "Out?" Carla's tone sharpened. "Out of what?" Eva hesitated, then spoke the truth she hadn't dared breathe to anyone outside the FBI contact. "He's not who he says he is, Victor. He's dangerous. I'm working with people, federal people. It's risky, but I have to protect Lucas." There was silence on the other end. Eva's stomach twisted. "Carla, are you still there?" "Yes," Carla said finally, her tone careful. "I'm here. I won't tell anyone, I promise." "You can trust me." Eva wanted to believe her, needed to. She hung up feeling lighter, but it was the last time she felt safe. 2 nights later, the trap closed. She was driving back from Ingrid's apartment. She'd risked a short visit with Lucas asleep in the back seat when headlights flared in her rearview mirror. Too close, too fast. Her pulse spiked. She turned onto a narrow street, the other car following. She sped up, her breath shallow. Lucas stirred in his car seat, whimpering. "Shh, baby, it's okay," she whispered, though her voice shook. The car behind her swerved, trying to cut her off. Her instinct screamed, "Victor knows." She slammed the accelerator, the tires screeching on wet asphalt. The baby cried louder. She turned wildly, aiming for a crowded avenue anywhere with light, people, witnesses. The pursuing car clipped her bumper. Metal screamed. Eva fought the wheel, panic clawing her throat. Up ahead, a red light, traffic clogging the intersection. She braked hard, swerved into a narrow alley and killed the headlights. She pressed her hand over Lucas's chest, feeling the rapid rise and fall of his breath. The black car roared past the alley without slowing. Eva sat shaking, tears streaming down her face, clutching her son. She knew then someone had betrayed her. Someone had told Victor, and only one person knew outside the FBI, Carla. The next day, Victor returned from Zurich. He kissed her cheek with calculated softness, his eyes lingering too long. "You went out late 2 nights ago," he said casually over breakfast. Her heart froze, "just to see my mother." He buttered his toast, his voice calm, almost tender. "It is unwise to drive alone at night with Lucas. Dangerous things happen." Eva forced a smile. "We were fine." Victor met her eyes. For now. She excused herself, retreating upstairs before the tears came. That night, she called Carla again. No answer. The next morning, she saw it. A wire transfer alert left open on Victor's desk. The name Carla Rodriguez printed beside numbers that made her stomach drop. He had bought her silence. Bought her betrayal. Eva slammed her fist against the marble counter, rage spilling through her veins. "You sold me," she whispered into the empty room. Her next meeting with the agent was tense, her voice shaking as she told her what happened. "They know," Eva said. "He knows." "I'm sure of it." The agent's jaw clenched. "Then you're out. We'll handle it from here." "No," Eva said fiercely. "If I stop now, it's all for nothing." "He'll win. He'll keep Lucas." The agent leaned in. "Eva, you're playing with fire. I don't care." Eva's voice broke, but she didn't look away. "I'd rather burn than let him raise my son in that empire of filth." That night, Eva sat in Lucas's nursery, rocking him slowly, the shadows thick around them. She pressed her cheek against his soft hair, breathing in his baby scent, and whispered her vow into the dark. "Victor will never own you. Never. Even if it kills me." Her tears fell onto his blanket, and in the silence of the mansion, Eva knew. Betrayal had closed in around her, the net was tightening. But she had one thing Victor could never understand. She was a mother, and mothers did not surrender. Not without a fight. Eva had never imagined herself capable of war. Yet as she stood over Lucas's crib, watching the steady rise and fall of his tiny chest, she knew that was exactly what she was waging, not with guns, not with fists, but with patience, precision, and fire sharpened into a blade. For months, Victor had been the hunter, circling her life, trapping her in velvet cages. Now it was her turn. She began with observation. Every deal Victor brokered left behind fingerprints, wire transfers, encrypted memos, late-night phone calls conducted in rapid German that he assumed she translated without comprehension. He underestimated her. Eva started keeping 2 sets of notes. One, the official minutes she translated for the board. The other, coded annotations she memorized in silence. Each line of numbers told her where money moved, which accounts opened, which rivals festered with envy under Victor's shadow. At night, while Lucas slept, she pored over them at her laptop. Notebooks scattered, eyes burning, she whispered to herself in German and English. Break the chain. Break the man. Her first weapon was Victor's rival in Warsaw, a steel magnate named Marek Nowak. She'd heard Victor dismiss him as a dog begging for scraps. But Eva had seen the accounts. Marek was bleeding money after Victor undercut him in a Baltic shipping deal. At a gala in Berlin, Eva made her move. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers. Men in tuxedos, women in gowns stitched with diamonds. Victor, distracted by investors, left Eva to orbit the room like an ornament. She slipped toward Marek, a glass of champagne steady in her hand despite the thunder in her chest. Mr. Nowak, she said softly, her German flawless. You don't know me, but I know you've lost 3 contracts this quarter, all to Victor Drexler. Marek's gaze snapped to hers, suspicion hardening. And you are? She smiled faintly. Someone who sees the cracks in his empire, someone who can help you widen them. For a moment, silence stretched. Then Marek chuckled, bitter and low. The mistress wants revenge. Not for myself, Eva replied. For my son. Victor builds cages for everyone. I won't let him build one for Lucas. Marek studied her face, the fierce tremor in her voice. Then he lifted his glass. Talk. The first seed was planted. Back in New York, she fed Marek just enough. Documents hinting at Victor's offshore accounts in Cyprus, whispers about unreliable shipping routes. Nothing traceable to her. Each leak cost Victor a little more credibility, a little more control, and each time, Eva felt a grim satisfaction pulse through her veins. But the deeper she sank, the more danger closed in. One night, Victor walked into her study without warning. She scrambled to slam her laptop shut, her heart slamming against her ribs. He raised an eyebrow. Still awake? Just reading, she lied, her voice soft. Victor crossed the room slowly, a predator assessing prey. He brushed a lock of hair from her face, his touch chilling. You're restless lately, he murmured, distracted. Is motherhood not enough for you? Eva forced a smile, though her palms were slick with sweat. It's everything. Lucas is everything. Victor studied her, eyes dark pools of suspicion. Then finally he kissed her forehead and whispered, Good. Keep it that way. When he left, Eva nearly collapsed. Her hands shook so badly she could barely breathe. One mistake and the plan would unravel. Her second strike was more dangerous. Victor's empire relied on loyalty, men bound by fear, money, and silence. But loyalty frayed under pressure. Eva found one such thread in Otto Kruger, Victor's longtime logistics chief. She caught him alone after a meeting, his tie loosened, sweat beading his brow. You don't trust him anymore, she said in German. Otto stiffened. Careful, Frau Morales. She leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. I know he cuts you out. I've seen the ledgers. He pays others more for less. How long before he discards you completely? Otto's eyes flickered. He didn't deny it. Help me, Eva pressed. Help me protect my son. And maybe you can protect yourself. His silence was answer enough. Weeks later, Otto's leaks began flowing. Shipment records, coded memos. Every file Eva passed to the feds was another stone pried from Victor's fortress. But revenge was a blade that cut both ways. One afternoon, Eva returned from the park with Lucas to find Victor waiting in the foyer. His face was calm, but his voice carried a steel edge. You were seen speaking to Nowak in Berlin. Eva's heart lurched, but she kept her face smooth. It was small talk. He approached me. Victor's gaze lingered, searching. Then, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, he took Lucas from her arms. Our son, he said softly, deserves a mother who is loyal. If I ever doubted that, he kissed Lucas's hair. I would take steps. The implication was clear. That night, Eva sobbed silently into her pillow, her body shaking as Lucas slept beside her. But even through the terror, her resolve hardened. If Victor suspected her now, there was no safety in hesitation. She had to strike faster, harder. Her third strike was boldest of all. Victor was negotiating a massive deal with a Middle Eastern shipping conglomerate, one that would secure new routes and new human cargo streams. If it succeeded, his empire would be unbreakable. Eva translated every meeting, her pen steady, her face calm. But each night she sent fragments of the contracts to the feds. Days later, whispers spread. A rival leaked details to the press. The conglomerate withdrew. Victor's fury was volcanic. Sabotage, he roared in German, slamming his fist against the table. His associates flinched. Someone feeds information to my enemies. Eva sat silent, her hands folded in her lap, heart pounding so loudly she thought the room could hear it. When they returned home, Victor poured himself whiskey in silence. The crystal glass trembled slightly in his hand. Trust is everything, he said at last, not looking at her. Without it, an empire crumbles. Eva whispered, "Do you trust me?" Finally, his eyes met hers. Cold. Searching. "Do you trust yourself?" The question hung between them like a knife. That night, Eva lay awake, Lucas's tiny hand curled around her finger. She had struck 3 times, Nowak, Otto, the shipping deal. Each move chipped away at Victor's empire, but every strike made her more visible, more vulnerable. The net she once tried to escape was now one she tightened around herself. She kissed Lucas's forehead, whispering, "You are why I fight. You are why I cannot stop." Yet deep inside, a shadow whispered back, "Revenge might not free you. Revenge might bury you, and if Victor fell, he would not fall alone. He would drag her down with him." The flashbulbs hit Eva like gunfire when she stepped out of the black SUV, clutching Lucas's small hand. The world roared. Cameras flashing, reporters shouting her name. Microphones shoved toward her face. "Eva, did you betray Victor? Eva, is it true you're the star witness? Eva, are you afraid for your life?" She gripped Lucas tighter, her chest burning. Federal agents flanked her, ushering her into the courthouse, but the noise clung to her like claws. The raid had been spectacular. News helicopters capturing the SWAT team storming Victor's penthouse, his empire cracking in real time. But the trial was worse. The courtroom was not safety. It was an inferno, and Eva was being thrown into the fire. The first day, Victor sat at the defense table in his tailored suit, looking less like a criminal than a king on temporary pause. His silver hair gleamed, his eyes calm. When they met hers, she felt the same chill that had once frozen her in that mansion. "You can't win," his gaze said. Her attorney leaned close. "Don't look at him. Look at the jury. Every word is for them." But Eva couldn't help it. Every time she tried to focus on the judge, the prosecutors, the carved wood of the witness stand, her eyes drifted back to Victor. He didn't smirk. He didn't need to. His stillness was enough. On the stand, the prosecutors guided her gently at first. "Ms. Morales, can you tell us how you came to work for Mr. Drexler?" Eva steadied her voice. "I was a waitress. I spoke German. He needed a translator. That night changed everything." "And what role did you later play in his business?" "I translated contracts, negotiations. I saw shipments, invoices. They weren't cargo. They were people." The jury shifted, faces tightening. For a moment, Eva felt strong. Her voice trembled but held. She was telling the truth. But then Victor's attorneys rose. The lead defense lawyer, a polished shark named Leonard Gable, approached with a smile that dripped venom. "Ms. Morales," he began, voice honey smooth, "you claim to have been Victor Drexler's translator, confidant, and eventually his lover. Is that correct?" "Yes." "You lived in his mansion, enjoyed his wealth, bore his child?" Eva stiffened. "I bore my child. Lucas is mine." Gable's smile widened. "Of course. But you admit you benefited from Victor's generosity. Private jets, couture gowns, the finest schools planned for your son. Would you call that the life of a prisoner?" The jury's eyes flicked toward her. Eva's stomach twisted. "I was controlled," she said, her voice tight. "Everything I did was under his control." "Controlled," Gable repeated softly, pacing before the jury. "Yet you admit you had access to his documents, his meetings, his trust. Convenient for someone seeking revenge, wouldn't you say?" Her pulse spiked. "I wasn't seeking revenge. I was trying to protect my son. Protect him, Gable echoed. From what exactly? A father who provided him safety and luxury? From a trafficker, she snapped, her voice cracking. Gasps rippled through the room. The judge banged the gavel. Order! Gable only smiled as if her outburst was the victory he wanted. The cross-examination grew crueler each day. They dredged up her past, her mother's poverty, her years waiting tables, even rumors from co-workers. You have a history of instability, Gable pressed. Isn't it true you once told a friend you wanted to burn it all down? Eva's throat tightened. I was desperate. Desperate women do desperate things, Gable said smoothly, turning to the jury. Isn't it possible you framed Victor Drexler out of spite, out of a desire to escape? Her attorney objected, but the damage was done. The seed of doubt was planted. The worst blow came when they turned Lucas into a weapon. Ms. Morales, Gable said, holding up a photo of her and Lucas outside the courthouse. You bring your child here often. Is that because you want the cameras to see you as a devoted mother? Eva's chest burned. I bring him because I won't let Victor's shadow touch him. Or, Gable said softly, leaning in, because Lucas is your shield, your prop, your tool to sway sympathy. Her eyes blurred with tears. Don't you dare say that about my son. The jury watched, silent, weighing every tremor in her voice. Each night, Eva collapsed in her hotel room, holding Lucas close as he slept. She whispered to him, though her voice was raw. They can say what they want. They can twist everything. But I know the truth. And I will not let him take you. But doubt crept in. What if the jury believed Victor's version? What if his lawyers painted her as unstable, vindictive, a mother unfit to raise Lucas? What if she lost him anyway? The turning point came midway through the trial. The prosecutors introduced the documents Eva had risked everything to leak, shipping records with falsified manifests, ledgers coated with human lives. The jury leaned forward, the weight of evidence shifting. On the stand again, Eva described the night she first discovered the files, the terror that gripped her as she realized Victor trafficked people like commodities. I held my son that night, she said softly, her voice breaking. And I promised him he would never grow up in his father's empire. That is why I am here. Not for revenge. For him. The courtroom was silent. Even Victor's stillness cracked. His jaw tightened, his hand clenched. For the first time, Eva felt the fire tilt in her direction. But victory was not assured. Every day was a battle, every question a blade. Eva learned to breathe, to anchor herself in Lucas's memory when her voice shook, to remind herself she wasn't fighting for vindication. She was fighting for her child. When the judge adjourned each afternoon, Eva walked past Victor's table. Sometimes he looked at her, sometimes he didn't. But his shadow always followed. And in that shadow, she felt the truth. This courtroom was not just about evidence. It was about survival. If she won, Victor would rot in prison. If she lost, she would lose Lucas. Either way, the fire would burn. The mirror had stopped being her ally. Each morning, Eva stared at her reflection in the hotel bathroom, dark circles beneath her eyes, skin sallow, lips chewed raw. She hardly recognized the woman staring back. The confident translator who once stood at Victor's side was gone. In her place was something brittle, hollowed out by courtrooms and headlines. The newspapers called her the waitress who betrayed the billionaire. Talk shows dissected her every gesture. Strangers debated her motherhood as though it were public property. She felt broken before the verdict was even reached. The media didn't stop at the courthouse steps. Reporters loitered outside the hotel. Paparazzi trailed her to the park when she dared take Lucas for fresh air. Photographs of her pushing his stroller appeared online, captions speculating whether she was weaponizing her child. But worse than the cameras were the loyalists. Men in tailored coats who lingered too long near the lobby. Anonymous letters slipped under her door. We see you. Lucas deserves his father. Traitors die quietly. At night, she triple-checked the locks, pulling Lucas into her bed, holding him as though her arms could keep the world away. But even in sleep, she was not free. The nightmares returned. She dreamed of Victor's study, the papers spread across his desk. Only this time, it wasn't nameless girls in the photographs. It was Lucas. His wide eyes stared at her from beneath words stamped in red. Verkauf. Lieferung. She woke gasping, drenched in sweat, clutching Lucas until he stirred and whimpered. "Mama, I'm here," she whispered. "Always here." But each morning, she wondered if she was lying. The prosecution warned her the defense was mounting new angles. Experts ready to label her unstable, former co-workers lined up to call her manipulative. "They'll drag you through the mud," her lawyer said. "It's their only chance." Ava laughed bitterly, as if there's anything left to drag. Her lawyer's eyes softened. "You're stronger than you think." She wasn't sure she believed him. The breaking point came one gray afternoon, after another grueling day of testimony. Back in the hotel, Ava collapsed on the edge of the bed, head in her hands. Lucas sat on the carpet, stacking blocks, humming to himself. His innocence made the room feel both holy and unbearable. "I can't do this," she whispered aloud, the words tasting like ash. "I can't keep fighting him, not like this." Her mind whispered a dangerous thought. Maybe if I let Victor have him, just custody, supervised something, maybe then he'd stop. Maybe Lucas would be safe. Her stomach churned with the thought, but it lingered like poison. She imagined walking into the courthouse and saying she would step aside, let Victor be the father he claimed to be. The cameras would capture her surrender. The world would brand her unfit, but at least Lucas wouldn't live under constant threat. The idea terrified her. It also tempted her. She sat in silence, tears streaming until a small voice broke the darkness. "Mama?" She looked down. Lucas had toddled toward her, a block in each hand, his eyes wide and unguarded. "What is it, my love?" she asked, her voice breaking. He placed the blocks in her lap and whispered, "Safe with Mama." Eva's chest cracked open. She pulled him into her arms, sobbing into his hair. "Yes," she whispered fiercely, "safe with Mama, always." In that moment, she realized what surrender would mean, not protection, but betrayal. Lucas trusted her. He believed she was his shield, his home. To give him to Victor was to hand him to the monster who had built his empire on cages. No courtroom, no lawyer, no headline could erase that truth. The next day, Eva walked into court different. Still tired, still hollow, but carrying a spark. When Victor's eyes sought hers, she did not look away. She let him see the fire his empire hadn't extinguished. On the stand, when Gable pressed her again about her instability, Eva answered without breaking. "Yes, I was unstable," she said, voice steady. "Any woman trapped under a man like Victor Drexler would be. But instability doesn't erase truth. Fear doesn't erase truth. And the truth is, he trafficked human beings. I saw it. I lived it." "I will not deny it." The jury leaned in. Even Gable faltered. For the first time in weeks, Eva felt herself rising from the ashes, but survival wasn't a single moment. It was a daily battle. After court, when cameras screamed questions, she held Lucas close and whispered into his hair, "We'll get through this." In the hotel, when nightmares came, she repeated his words back to herself, "Safe with Mama," and when doubt threatened to creep in, she remembered the look in Victor's eyes that morning, the first flicker of unease she'd ever seen in him. She was not just the shattered woman anymore. She was rebuilding. For Lucas, for herself. The system might be rigged, the odds stacked, but as long as Lucas believed in her, Ava would not break again. The courtroom was so still it felt like breath had been outlawed. Eva sat rigid on the bench, her palms damp, Lucas's photograph tucked in her pocket like a talisman. The jury filed back in, each face unreadable. She searched them desperately, trying to divine the future in the tight set of a jaw, the flicker of an eye. Nothing. The foreman rose. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Victor Drexler." A pause long enough to tear her in half. Not guilty on all major counts. The words detonated in her skull. Gasps broke through the courtroom. Reporters scrambled, pens flying. Victor's attorneys embraced one another like victors in a war. Eva couldn't breathe. Her chest clamped shut, the world spinning. The judge banged the gavel for order, but the sound was distant, muffled. All Eva could hear was Lucas's voice from the night before whispering, "Safe with Mama. Safe." Nothing was safe now. Victor rose smoothly, adjusting his cufflinks as though nothing in his world had ever been at stake. His silver hair gleamed under the lights, his expression calm, composed, unscarred by months of trial. When his gaze met hers, a small smile tugged at his lips. Not a gloating grin, not triumph, but patience returned, sharpened. "I win because I wait." Eva's stomach twisted. The prosecutors leaned close, their voices hushed, furious. Technicalities. Some of the evidence from Kruger was ruled inadmissible. Chain of custody issues. Without it, the jury couldn't convict on trafficking charges. We still got minor financial penalties, but minor penalties? Eva hissed. Her voice cracked under the weight of disbelief. "He walks free." The younger prosecutor, face pale, nodded. Yes, her lawyer touched her arm gently. "Eva, listen to me. The empire he built, it's collapsing. Investors are gone. Rivals smell blood. He's free, but he's weaker than ever." She shook him off. "Weaker?" He's standing there, smiling. "That's not weak. That's the wolf getting back into the forest." Outside, chaos erupted. Cameras flashed, microphones shoved forward, voices overlapping. "Eva, how do you feel after the verdict? Do you fear for your son now that Victor is free? Eva, do you regret testifying?" She couldn't answer. Federal agents pushed her through the crowd, shielding her. But every question stabbed deeper. "Do you regret? Do you regret?" No, she didn't regret. But she had lost. Back in the hotel, Eva sat motionless in the dark. Lucas slept curled beside her, small fingers clutching his stuffed bear. Her phone buzzed. Messages from allies, lawyers, reporters. She ignored them all. Instead, she replayed the trial in her head. Every question, every answer, every attack on her motherhood. She'd laid her soul bare, and still the system bent to Victor's money, his power, his shadows. She whispered to the silence. It was never about truth. It was about who could survive the fire. And Victor had survived. Again. Yet something gnawed at her. When she closed her eyes, she remembered the courtroom after the verdict. Not just Victor's smile, but the way his attorneys clutched him too tightly, the way investors had avoided his handshake, the whispering that rippled through the gallery. Yes, he was free, but he was alone. The empire she had chipped at was splintering. Nowak had stolen contracts. Otto Kruger had defected. The shipping deal collapsed. Even the press, who once painted Victor as untouchable, now used words like controversial. Embattled pariah. He had walked out of prison, but into a wasteland of his own making. Eva clutched Lucas tighter. Realization dawning. Freedom wasn't always victory. Sometimes it was exile. Days later, she saw him again on television. Victor stood at a press conference, reporters shouting questions, cameras clicking. He wore the same suit, the same calm smile, but Eva looked closer. His skin was pale, thinner. His jaw clenched when a reporter asked about fractured business ties. He brushed it off, but the edges showed. The wolf had been loosed, but he was bleeding. For the first time, Eva felt not terror, but clarity. He had underestimated her once, seeing only a waitress. He would underestimate her again, seeing only a shattered woman. But Eva Morales was neither. She was a mother with one final card hidden in her sleeve, and patience, his weapon, was something she had learned too. That night, she tucked Lucas in and sat at the desk with her notebook. On the first page, she wrote one word: silence. It was what the verdict had given Victor. But silence was not peace. It was the space before the storm. Eva smiled faintly for the first time in months. "You think it's over?" She whispered into the dark. "But it's only beginning." Her reflection in the window no longer looked shattered. It looked sharp, dangerous. The verdict had broken her heart, but it had also given her freedom. From illusions, from the belief the system would save her. If justice would not come from the court, she would bring it herself. And when it came, Victor Drexler would never see it until it was too late. The storm didn't come in thunderclaps or lightning. It came in silence. Keystrokes on a laptop. Encrypted messages sent across oceans. Numbers shifting invisibly on screens. Eva Morales sat in the dim glow of her hotel room. Lucas asleep in the next bed, and watched the empire of Victor Drexler dissolve line by line. Each transfer, each closure, each anonymous leak was a blade drawn across the jugular of his fortune. The man who had once seemed untouchable, larger than life, was bleeding out in the language he respected most. Money. She hadn't slept in days. But exhaustion had transformed into focus, sharp as glass. Eva knew where to cut because she had been his shadow, translating documents no one else could read, filing papers Victor thought she didn't understand. She remembered account numbers, shell corporations, offshore havens masked by German phrases no American banker could decode. Now those secrets were her arsenal. When she pressed send on the final transfer, routing millions toward authorities and watchdog groups, her hands trembled. Not from fear, but release. Safe with Mama. Lucas had whispered weeks ago. Tonight she believed it. Victor noticed quickly. By the time news broke of seizures in Zurich and Cayman, his face was already on every screen. Billionaire assets frozen amid international investigation. Eva watched him on television, flanked by weary attorneys. His silver hair looked thinner, his jaw tighter. He tried to maintain calm, but his voice betrayed cracks. "These are baseless attacks orchestrated by jealous rivals," he declared. But Eva saw the truth. The wolf was cornered and the world was watching. The confrontation came sooner than she expected. It was late evening. Lucas was coloring in the corner when a knock echoed at the hotel door. Too firm to be housekeeping, too patient to be random. Her chest froze. She slid Lucas into the bathroom, kneeling to his eye level. "Lock the door. Stay quiet. No matter what you hear, don't open it until I come." His lip trembled, but he nodded. Brave, her son. Braver than she ever felt. Eva rose, smoothed her shirt, and opened the door. Victor Drexler stood there. No entourage, no attorneys. Just him. His tailored coat was rumpled, his eyes burning with something between rage and desperation. "Eva." His voice was low, smooth, almost tender. "May I come in?" She stepped aside, not out of submission, but calculation. This was the end. Inside, Victor surveyed the room like it belonged to him. His gaze lingered on the faint sound of Lucas's crayons scratching behind the bathroom door. "You've done well," he said finally. "I underestimated you." "That was my mistake." Eva crossed her arms. "Your last mistake." He chuckled softly, but the sound lacked conviction. "You think draining my accounts finishes me? Money flows back always. I can rebuild." "No," she said calmly. "Not this time. Not with regulators circling, allies gone, investors abandoning ship. You're finished, Victor. Not because I destroyed you, but because you can't control me anymore." His eyes narrowed. "Control is survival. For you, not for me." He stepped closer, his presence still suffocating, though thinner now, less certain. "You loved the power," he murmured. "Don't lie. The jets, the villas, the way people bowed when you spoke. I gave you more than any life in a diner could. And you threw it away." Eva felt heat rise in her chest, not shame but anger long simmering. "You gave me nothing," she snapped. "You took my voice, my choices, my freedom. You thought you could cage me like the girls in your files. But I'm not your possession. I'm Lucas's mother." At his name, Victor's gaze flicked toward the bathroom. A flicker of something crossed his face. Desire, maybe even longing. "Lucas is mine as well," he said. The words sliced deeper than any threat. Eva stepped between him and the door. "No, he's mine. And he will never know you, not as father, not as man. You'll be a ghost, Victor. A story I'll tell him about the danger he survived." Silence stretched thick with years of unspoken war. Finally, Victor's shoulders sagged. He looked smaller than she had ever seen him. The courtroom hadn't broken him, but her defiance now did. "You've ruined me," he whispered. "No," Eva said. Her voice was steel. "You ruined yourself. I just stopped pretending not to see." For a heartbeat, she feared violence, that he'd lunge, strike, force her down like in the nightmares. Her body tensed, ready to fight, to scream for help. But Victor only straightened his coat, reclaiming the veneer of dignity. "This isn't the end," he muttered. "It is." Eva replied, "Because I don't fear you anymore." He left without another word. The door clicked shut, and Eva stood trembling, the echo of his presence still heavy in the air. Then Lucas emerged, wide-eyed, clutching his bear. "Mama!" She knelt, pulling him into her arms, burying her face in his hair. "It's over," she whispered. "We're safe." And for the first time, she believed it. Weeks later, headlines read, "Drexler exiled. Billionaire retreats to unnamed estate amid financial collapse." The world still whispered about him, but the tone had shifted. Not admiration, not fear, pity. Eva didn't read the articles anymore. She took Lucas to the park, to school, to quiet places where her name wasn't shouted. She began writing. Her story, their story, not as testimony but as reclamation. When Lucas asked why she typed so late at night, she smiled. "Because words are stronger than money. Stronger than men like him?" He nodded solemnly, as if he understood. On a warm spring morning, Eva closed the laptop, took Lucas's hand, and stepped into the sunlight. She wasn't the waitress who once saved a deal, nor the mistress trapped in silk cages, nor the shattered woman crushed by a verdict. She was something harder, fiercer. A mother who had faced the wolf and lived. A woman who had reclaimed her voice. And as they walked into the brightness of the day, Eva knew one thing with certainty: nobody would ever silence her again.